I was listening to the radio at the time, and I remember the announcement coming through that Canada was going to host the 2010 Olympics. And I literally in that moment remember saying, I'm somehow going to work in those Olympics. I don't know how. I didn't know I was going to be a strength coach at the time. I was like, I'm going to be there. It was like instant in my head.
They say never meet your heroes, but clearly they did not say that about the Matt Price. I've been a fan of yours for a while, not a superhero, but from your webinars to now meeting you in person to get on a podcast with you. So thank you very much for doing super good stuff in the field, for being a good dude, and for making the time today. So thank you for that. How are you doing today? Tell me something good that's going on in your life, and then I'll give you another fire intro after that.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I just got my tires pumped up there. So you're making my head a little big. No, I appreciate it. And it's cool to be able to sit down and talk shop with you here today.
So a Canadian, that's why it's so nice. Hopefully the accent will come out during this chat. But currently he's the director of strength and performance science for the LA Kings. Been with that org going on 11 years, correct?
Yeah, I just finished my 11th year, and we're already ramping up for year 12.
Heck yeah, which is a testament to doing super high level work, but also just loyalty and committing to one kind of org where, man, if someone in this field is somewhere for like 3+ years, you're like, is it going really well or really bad? You know? But also with that being said, like you've been a power user, and that's what brings us together of 1080, one of the first sprint ones and on ice, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure I could be corrected here. I think we were the second quantum ever sold and installed in North America, and same thing with the Sprint, maybe second with that. And we quickly added another quantum synchro system. So yeah, we were on top of it pretty quickly, but you know, it was a no-brainer at the time, and now we're 10 plus years into to being heavy users of that technology.
So a legitimate power user and one of the longest tenured ones. And your webinars on 1080 was one of the like three or four or five that I would watch again and again and again. And every time I would kind of learn something new. Fortunate enough to have the chance to sit down with you in person at the Ritz, where I felt very out of place when you guys played the Blackhawks. Yeah, you were super nice. So thank you again for that. Good at what you do also, but going on 20 years in the field, you're a hustler yourself. So scrolling through your LinkedIn, first, your government name says Matthew Price. And second, whatever that profile picture was of that photo shoot, looking like a model over there. Could you just briefly go down all the stuff that you got going on currently and also, I guess, expired from Vector to there was the Strength Coach Kitchen or something kind of like that? You're a
Oh
hustler
boy.
basically.
Wow, yeah. Now we could dig up the dirt there, but yeah, obviously my primary responsibilities here with the LA Kings, and now in a slightly different role than what I started with. So I think it was 4 or 5 years ago now where I sort of transitioned into more of a directing role and overseeing a department that had grown from essentially me as the one-man band, and we started to diversify and add multiple disciplines underneath that performance department heading, and so the time was right to have someone, obviously it was me, but to have some oversight and make sure that all of the different staff are working together and pulling the rope in the same direction, and that the vision and mission were clear, and that we again were well integrated, and making sure that we delivered a cohesive message and a cohesive program to all of our athletes. So that's first and foremost. You touched on it. We've got a really cool startup that I've been involved with here with a partner, that a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with, is Matt Jordan. And Matt and I have started a small company called Vector Hockey Performance, sort of a passion project, a place where we can, it's a creative outlet where we can publish and write on topics that are near and dear to our hearts. There's a gap in our sport, I feel, where there's not a real clear-cut resource for coaches and athletes and parents, and on all things that are related to preparing hockey players, from across the whole spectrum of ages. As a part of that we've been in the R&D now for about 3 years, working with our other partners, ViewMotion, and created a really cool product called Stride FX. So it's, essentially an AI-based smartphone program that can, take a fairly simple effort. We use a 20-meter sprint as our first analysis, and overlay lab quality biomechanics assessments. As someone who's been passionate about speed and skating my entire life, this has been a real game changer for me as a practitioner, and now super excited to be able to share that with the rest of the hockey community. And I'm really excited to see what people come up with and how they use the tool and what we can learn and share together. So that's sort of what I have now as my main responsibilities. Obviously, uh, probably fairly well known that I help with 1080 and sort of, guide and advise on product and software development, and as as you said before, a power user, kind of the things that work well and some of the things that don't work well in the training setting, and help shape the direction of some of those developments, which is a really fun thing because I am extremely passionate about what 1080 has as a suite of products. And it's been super impactful in my training here. So that's a fun group to be involved with. Prior to that, I was the head strength coach, head of performance for the Canadian Alpine Olympic ski team. I did that for 7 years.
A lot of palm
Uh,
trees out there.
yeah, very few palm trees. However, there were palm trees in Sochi, Russia, when we landed, so that was kind of odd to see on your way up to a ski hill. But yeah, I did that for two Olympic cycles, which was super awesome. Really fell in love with that sport. Still follow it to this day. Just a really badass group of athletes and a super cool sport to be around. Working backwards here, now you're getting into some things that are kind of fringy for me, right? Like these are in the days of where social media was sort of just coming out, and no one really knowing what they were doing with it. It was um kind of a fun time. But actually, you brought up things like Strength Coach Kitchen, which again was just I had some time on my hands and was screwing around in the kitchen and trying to make healthy snacks, and then ended up posting stuff like that, which was not a business, was just something silly that I thought would be fun to do. In fact, you could go back, and I hope no one listening to this goes and tries to find this, but Matt Jordan and I actually started a podcast, 2010 or 2011. Again, we called it the Powercast, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe recorded 5 or 6 episodes, and just didn't continue with it. Which, in hindsight, it would have been cool to be one of the early uh, strength
Podcasters,
and
yeah.
conditioning podcasts. But again, I had no idea what I was doing. We didn't know how to edit. We didn't know anything. It was just like this big, long, drawn out conversation, and yeah, thankfully no one really brings that up anymore because it's probably embarrassing. But yeah, we dabbled with stuff, and it was just a time where these things were new, and you're trying things, right? Especially the time of your career, maybe the age you're at, where like, hey, you're maybe a little less inhibited and willing to put yourself out there.
Everyone starts somewhere, and for the record, you were on my list to be on the podcast before I started working for Tinity. But everyone starts somewhere. Like my blog, I won't put the URL out there because it is still up there for some reason. It's Blogspot. That's like Google's free whatever. When I was an intern, I thought I knew everything after that summer. So I was like, oh, cool, Eric Cressy has a blog, so I'm gonna make a blog. So there's blogs for me back in like 2016. But hey, we all start somewhere. So, but no, super glad to get you on. You're a hustler and entrepreneur, really good at your day job, I guess, if that's what we want to call it. So before we get into the first kind of question, I want you to quickly tell the bird nest story, just to show how early you were with the Sprint 1 when you finally got some ice time with it, the like 2 week trial and it like exploded. Samson Equipment has elite strength training equipment and professional weight room solutions that'll get you in the door, but they have the people, the customer service, and the processes that'll keep you there. They've been doing so since 1976, and not only will their equipment completely transform and elevate your training, but they have the people that'll make the process as easy and enjoyable as possible. I can't speak high enough of them as a company from the top down, so please reach out to me directly for their contact information or visit Samson Equipment, that's SAMSON equipment.com to learn more.
Okay, so I was introduced to the sprint by some of the people that were working with 1080 at the time in Sweden. They were some tennis coaches, and they'd happened to come through LA to go to Indian Wells for one of the major stops on the tennis tour. And I was introduced to them. They came by, they brought the sprint. We started playing with it. They're showing me what it could do. I mean, my mind was racing, right? And I was like, "Oh my God, this could."
What year was this? And was it a light bulb that makes sense or a light bulb of like, this is too next level?
No, I mean, instantly I saw application for it. Like this was going to be a game changer. There was zero doubt in my mind. I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016, but somewhere
So
around
about
that
10
time.
years ago.
Um, yeah, and I was just like, this is a really incredible tool. This is going to be super applicable to ice hockey. I had to get my hands on it. And I was still early days with the Kings. My idea was I need to get this in. I want to do some testing on athletes. And I had done something in my undergrad that was like the homemade version of a sprint, but it was just for profiling purposes. It had no resistance or anything like that. So I had a little idea of how this type of thing might work on ice. And so I wasn't able to purchase it right away, but I was able to rent it for a couple weeks. And Peter at 1080 was willing to kind of let me bring it in and give it a shot. So I get it on the ice, and again, I had a crash course for about 20 minutes on how to operate the device and started testing people. And I'm under time crunch. Like they said, you can use it, but you have 10 minutes to come on the ice, set it up, run everyone through it, and get the hell out of there. And I'm like, oh my God, talk about pressure. But again, you want to deliver, you want to show value. And I really think this is going to be a big thing for us moving forward. So I get it on the ice and I start rolling through people, and it's just like, turn them, turn them, turn them. And one of the things, if people listening have used the sprint, obviously someone runs out, does their skating or their running sprint, you got to bring the line back, right? And so on the ice, um, I'm trying to bring this thing back as fast as possible, which is a bad thing, right? And it just basically overspins, and it comes back into the unit, like you said, a bird's nest, kind of like if you're a fisherman and you've had that line come back into the reel too quickly. It blew up like this, seized the whole motor, wrapped around the axles, like total chaos. It happened to end on one of the last athletes in that group, and I was going to have another 10-minute block. I think it was in an hour, and I was under full panic mode. And I had one of my minor league coaches there, and we're trying to pull the thing apart. And you know, long story short is we got it uncoiled, and got it back operational and got out to finish the next session. And then that was the moment where we realized, okay, let's run the line back through a towel so that there's a little bit of tension there. Like when you're fishing, you kind of you keep some tension on your line. So we learned that very quickly. We got the data. And I'll finish with how we ended up purchasing the unit, which was we had drafted a player that year that wasn't a great skater. And I got to present data that I completely didn't understand to a very important room of management and scouts and coaches. And I'm just kind of showing them, hey, here's some times, here's the fast guys, here's the slow guys. And I showed this image of, and most of the people here are familiar with, the sort of the time velocity tracing. And you can see these undulations, right, that are the stride by
The
stride sort of
curves, we call it.
outputs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the curves. And so I said, well, here's a fast player's curve, here's another fast player's curve. And there was sort of a distinct characteristic to it. And some of them were very high peaks and valleys, and some of them a little bit more smoothed out, but fairly symmetrical. And then I pulled up the third sample, and you don't have to be a sports scientist to understand something looked weird with this curve tracing. And it was essentially peak and then this stuttery type thing, and then another peak and this other chundery type, wonky step. And what it was that the athlete, and I had video to back this up, but the athlete was planting really poorly on his left foot, rolling the foot from, the inside or the outside edge back to the inside edge, taking all this time to re-engage and reload. So I didn't tell them. I said, "Who do you think this athlete is?" And
Oh,
some
that's
spattering
smart.
of
That's
guesses,
smart.
and I said, "Actually, it's the player we just drafted." And I said, "I don't know what it is necessarily, but there's clearly an issue here with how this player pushes on one of his feet. He's essentially skating on one leg." Um, and the GM at the time, was like, "Oh my God, that's really cool. I think we can really work with this. This is great stuff." And I said, "I know. The bummer is I rented this device. I got to send it back tomorrow." And he goes, "F that. I'm buying it. It's not going anywhere." I was like, "Boom, got it. All right, now we're off to the races." So,
Sorry, Peter. It's staying with me. Here's a check.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So, quick little background crash course. We got about 30 minutes to chop it up. So, first question brought to you by 1080 Motion. Shocker. They were a sponsor of the podcast before they hired me, but really good people, really good tech, all the above. 1080motion.com. And then also slash webinars if you want to learn more. That's the plug. But what is the coolest, craziest story you have thus far that you couldn't make up if you tried? Kind of like how that bird's nest one kind of stuck out to me. If you had to recall a different kind of story like that from any part of your 20 years, what would it be?
Yeah, like I don't know if there's stories like that necessarily pop out. Growing up in Canada, a former high level hockey player, dreamed to play in the NHL. Like I'm a sports guy. Um, I can say this. Like I remember I was in my undergrad and I was working these crummy jobs in the summer to earn money and doing this thing. And I remember this one day pushing a lawnmower in like super humid hot weather in the middle of the summer. And I was like I hate my life and you know can't wait to one day have a real job. And I don't remember the year. It's going to be early 2000s, but essentially I was listening to the radio at the time and I remember the announcement coming through that Canada was going to host the 2010 Olympics. And I literally in that moment remember saying, "I'm somehow going to work in those Olympics." I don't know how. I didn't know I was going to be a strength coach at the time. I was like, "I'm going to be there." It was like instant in my head. And so, fast forward a number of years, I ended up in Calgary in my master's program, kind of being groomed and persuaded to get into the ski team, which needed new leadership, taking over a sport that I had never really worked in before. And lo and behold, in 2010, I'm a fully accredited member of the Canadian Olympic ski team, home games, home country. It happens every 25 years if you're lucky. So just like the timing of where I was in my career, the Olympics being there, being part of one of the marquee sports, one of the top sports organizations in winter sport in Canada, and being there and being participant in that event, that was like really wild to me. And just always thinking back, oh my God, like what were the chances that I would have this moment pushing a lawnmower and then whatever it was 6 7 years later I'm standing here wearing the uniform. Like that to me was like really profound. The other one was, you know I get hired by the LA Kings. They had just won two Stanley Cups in 3 years. A good friend of mine had left the position to go to Calgary, Ryan Van Asten. And so I kind of move into this role, and again, as a lifetime hockey fan, and just like this was the dream job. Um, I never won the Stanley Cup, still have never won the Stanley Cup, but in the first couple months, I got to sort of be around some of the pageantry and the ceremonies of what that championship team had accomplished. So again, as a bystander almost, but getting to see the Stanley Cup in the building, which is sort of the holy grail of the sport, and like, oh my God, there's the cup, watching the banner be raised, seeing the players be presented with their championship rings at a special dinner, like just to sort of almost fly on the wall type experience of like watching what it's like for a championship team after they've won. That was really cool. And then actually later that year, again, going to the White House with the team, not being on stage again. I wasn't part of the team, but sitting front row with President Obama there and watching this whole ceremony, right? Like that stuff's like very surreal. And it's still my goal to be on the other side of that stage and stand there with the president and say, hey, we won it all. But yeah, I got to kind of be around those things that are just like, you know, mind blowing in a sense and really cool experiences.
The first question about the first story is, why was your default not I'm going to compete in those Olympics?
Yeah, mostly because I knew my athletic career was likely over. Again, I don't remember the exact age I was, but I was a hockey player. I wasn't going to be there doing biathlon or ski jumping or bobsleigh or something. Like I was a hockey player, and 0% chance I was participating in that Olympics as a hockey player. So
For
no,
Team
I mean,
Canada.
yeah, yeah. Unless I came up with some fake citizenship for Team Italy or something. But no, it was just, yeah, I actually have no idea why that popped into my head so clearly and with such conviction. Like I was just like,
It was
oh, I'm gonna be
very
there.
clear, yeah.
Yeah, and not even knowing what the role would be. It was just like, oh, I'm gonna do that somehow. Um, and that was it. So
Heck yeah. And then
yeah.
second, so with the, Stanley Cup or World Series for baseball, as I'm a baseball guy, but also me in my old age, 5 years of full-time coaching, like I'm starting to realize my role is like less and less and less in the grand scheme of things, right? Like TCU beach volleyball, they just won it all. I did sports science for them starting in 2018, 2019, and they won it all this past year in 2025. And I was talking to the assistant coach, the one that I've worked the most with, and she was like, just thank you for your help, like literally all these years, And like I'm over 1,000 miles away. I'm just helping with the data. I'm like talking to the coach once a week, like just nothing that crazy. I don't even talk to the head coach. I don't talk to any of the players besides the captains every now and again. And it's like, yeah, I helped more than 0%. I don't know like how much more, like they got better players, the coaches got, but there's just like so many things, right? Let alone being a full-time staff member there. So, like, where does that come into your mind as a practitioner of like, there's some players that the rhetoric about them once they retire is like, oh, but they never got a ring, right? So, like, there are so many other things between like who the GM brings in and if, freak injuries do or don't happen for like you to get a Stanley Cup. So, like, what is your mindset on something like that as a practitioner? Being like, so is it like, I got to do it no matter what? Is it cool if it happens, but I know that like my impact is, kind of what's your mindset about a Stanley Cup being at such a prestigious kind of org?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And listen, a lot of people spend a lot of time, NHL, MLB, NFL, NBA. Like there's people that spend careers in those leagues and never win. And I think, as much as we want to hold up people that have won championships as being at the top of the game or you get labeled a champion. That's for life. You're a champion. That's awesome. I don't think it defines people like us as practitioners. It can't. I think you mentioned it already. Uh, you know, there's someone else responsible for drafting. There's someone else responsible for developing those athletes to become full-time pros. There's general managers that sign and trade athletes. There's a head coach who's responsible for the on-ice tactics and how they manage the games. Those are the big rocks in place that likely are determining whether a team is in a championship contention window or not, right? Um, and so, yes, totally driven to win. That's why I want to work in the team environment. That's why, you sacrifice time away from family. That's why you work long hours. That's why you're driven. You can't win a championship working at a private facility. It doesn't happen that way. So, that's sort of how I look at why I'm in the role I am and why I want to be here. It's to win first and foremost. Of course, and I've talked about this in the past. I think you have to redefine what winning is in your individual role, right? And so, what does winning look like for a performance director or for a strength coach uh, in our program? You know, I've talked about being innovative, uh, being rooted in science, having a clear vision and mission, having a clear philosophy, but always challenging what we do, always looking to improve, um, and not being afraid to try new things. What can we do to help move the needle to reduce risk of injury even by a little bit, or to improve capacity a little bit, or to understand some facet of our game a little bit better? I've been doing this for 20 years as a strength coach. I played hockey to a professional level, and I've got, so you could call that 35 plus years of being around the sport at the highest levels, or at high levels. And so the curve isn't as steep as it used to be, but um, it comes down to like little things every year. What else can we do to just improve this? What did we learn from last year that worked or didn't work that we can build on or move away from, and continue to refine the process or make it more efficient and more effective? And at the end of every season, we have 32 teams in the league, which means 31 are disappointed. They didn't win. And so what does winning look like for us? We reflect on our season, and then what worked, what didn't, and how are we going to improve next year? And I think if we're not evolving, if we're not changing and not improving, or at least trying to improve, to me, that's a loss. But if we've done our job, if we've really looked at how we can improve, and internally critiqued our processes, to me, that's a win. And across now 11 seasons, like, again, I'm lucky to have that sort of tenure where I can look back. It's hard to reflect on 1 year, reflect on 2 years, but there's a body of work there, and a body of evidence that says this has been working, or this hasn't been working, and we just continually tweaking that, and just trying to improve every season.
Boom, mic drop. Very nice.
Yeah.
So moving on, because I definitely want to get through all of these. So some context myself, my 5 years of experience, I know a lot. I think I have two phases so far. I have the first 3 years that were kind of just like a blur, where I thought I knew a lot of stuff. And then years 4 and 5 is where I really had my own philosophy and I could like intentionally tweak programs and variables and like do experiments and actually like learn, right? So, having coached for almost 20 years, how would you, because it's not every year is like its own thing. I'm sure there's phases, right? And themes. How would you kind of divide up those 20 years into each kind of chunk? And what was like the biggest kind of takeaway from each?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I have three pretty distinct phases or chunks of my career. So coming out of my undergrad, you got, your first job at a private facility, first time working around elite athletes. And I spent 2 or 3 years just in private training centers. First off, as a former player, I had what I called street cred right away. So as a young strength coach with basically no experience, pro guys and senior guys trusted me right away, which was kind of cool, which gave me a little bit of leash to sort
Which
of
counts.
establish myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it still counts. Like, it's still valuable. And to your point, you're heavily influenced in your first few years by the people you work around. There's a guy named Lauren Goldenberg who's a fairly well-known name, especially in hockey strength and conditioning. I got to work with him for 2 summers in Ottawa at the time. And, to me, a lot of the principles that Lauren believed in and taught are still very impactful on me today, and still influence some of my decision making around exercise selection and program writing. Um, but of course, you take that experience from those, what I think were 3 years in the private setting. I moved west to Calgary to do a master's degree, and then was surrounded by another group of really, really smart people. Obviously, getting more into exercise science and physiology, and more advanced training methodologies. And that's where the sort of application piece and deeper understanding of exercise science and exercise physiology, like I said, just kind of continues to refine itself. I had incredible mentors there. My master supervisors at the time were considered two of the top people in the country that were really running the show for most of the winter sports, which is the dominant Olympic Games in Canada. Steve Norris and Dave Smith. But also got to work very closely around guys like Matt Jordan, Stu McMillan, who were also there at the time, get to hang out with them, see how they program, how they coach, sit in their office, have coffee, and just absorb, right? And all those things continue to shape you. One of the cool things about those guys are they're very philosophical thinkers, and that's where I realize that about myself too, is just to be able to sit and talk about crazy ideas or get off on tangents and talk about things that aren't really sports science or strength conditioning um, topics, but these other things that seem to influence how we coach athletes or how we program or how we think about problems. And that was a really cool experience. I was there for 9 years, spent a lot of time around those people, and still, those are not only are they friends, but those are people I look up to, and those are the people whose opinions matter most. Um, so there's that middle layer there where I got to be around smart people. I was handed the keys to the Olympic ski team with zero experience ever skiing, right? So someone trusted me to take this program on with home Olympics coming down the pipe in 3 years. Um, and what was cool was I went into this sport and didn't try to confess that I knew everything or everything about the sport. Came in very naive, was allowed to ask silly questions. Why do we do this? Why is that done? And not questioning the sport or the culture, but trying to understand. And the coaches I worked with were, very accepting to that sort of theme of questioning, and they took it as a positive, and in fact a lot of times said, yeah, I don't know why we do it that way, and I never understood why we do that, and it kind of helped shape some things. And it was my first time working in a team environment, and you're interacting with medical staff, coaching staff, athletes that are, they're not professionals, they're not the people you turn the TV on and see on TNT or ESPN, but around the world, these are the best of the best in a big time sport, learning to deal with different personalities and different emotions and all of the logistics that go into a ski team. They're decentralized across the country, and how are you communicating with them, or how are you setting up training camps, or how are we going to work within the training environment when we're down in South America on top of a mountain and you have no tools available, like just learning to be super adaptable and flexible in a wild sport that doesn't have we're not staying at the Ritz in Chicago. We're staying at little tiny hotels on the side of a mountain where you've got no gear to work with, and you can train in the parking garage type of thing. So that was really, really, really impactful. The other piece to that was massive events. Like, you've got to peak for a race once a week, or an Olympics every 4 years, or a world championship every 2 years. And these are significant events. I know, again, in North America, we don't really pay attention to them. You go to Europe, this is what they live for. 100,000 people at some of these races. And and these athletes are household names, right? So again, um, how do we prepare someone across a week for a single event? How are we building across 4 years for a single event? What are all the things that go into that? And that was a really cool experience to kind of, you know, just to learn what it takes, and obviously had people that really helped me along the way. But those were major, major learning moments, which definitely affected my transition into the NHL. So after the 2014 Olympics, I was hired in LA. And again, there's a lot of things I could pull from my team experience with the ski team, but then it's a totally different team environment in the NHL, right? And I'm someone who was essentially raised in the sport, and you have these preconceived notions of what it's going to be like, and then you get into it and you're like, oh my God, like I never thought of this, or this. And you're learning to keep the GM happy, keep the coach happy, keep the players happy. You know, again, you're playing 82 games in 180 days. It is a crazy dense schedule. It is hard on the body. It's hard to get rest. It's hard to keep up. And again, my first couple of years, it was just me trying to do everything, trying to deliver at a high level, trying to impress the bosses, trying to build relationships with athletes. And now instead of 6 or 7 athletes, you've got 24 or 25, and there's super high paid superstar athletes. There's the young guy coming in, and there's a fairly diverse group that need different things, whether it's from a training standpoint or from a personal standpoint, or how to manage this sort of personality and who, group dynamics, and how is that guy going to influence this guy. And it's tough at first. Again, I was able to fall back on experiences and had enough to go on to sort of manage that early on and navigate those waters. But that third phase really sort of to me was bringing all of these things together and tying it together into this sort of uniformed approach to how I wanted to work within the team. And you learn quickly, but yeah, those are the sort of the three big blocks. And like I said, I'm still fortunate to be here, and it's still mission critical. We're looking to win, uh and hopefully again these things all come together one day and culminate in a championship.
So the blur at the beginning, and then learn some of the foundational kind of core principles and tenets and real life stuff, and then put it together on a big stage. If I had to try to summarize all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Boom, very nice. All right, so we got three more to go. So speaking of making it to the show, I guess that's also what they call it in hockey, yeah?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. The big show.
The big show. So making it to the NHL, not as a player, but as a staff member, what is one thing that has completely exceeded your expectations and one thing that it's not all that, or what an outsider might think about being in the NHL?
I thought about this question, and I don't know if I really had major expectations coming in. Obviously, just excited to finally get a job in the league, get a job with what I would think is one of the top organizations in the sport. I mean, these are the this is the best league in the world, has the best players in the world, and for my money, the one of the best organizations in the league. However you want to define that, but it's a really great environment here, and it's certainly heavily oriented towards winning and doing all things that we can to help teams win. So yeah, not really having expectations, but I think preconceived notions more than anything, and thinking what it was going to be like to be in that environment. There's always things that can be done better. There's always things that are done really well, and that's coming from my own perspective and saying, oh, I would have expected that to be better. I didn't realize how good that was, and you're just kind of navigating those waters and then figuring out where you fit within that team dynamic and what you can affect as a person and a member of the team. Really, it's just about understanding how to manage that world. It's super dynamic. It's super, as much as there's structure, right? Like we have our schedule, we kind of know where we are every day for the next 8 months. The daily plans can change, and expecting things to just be sort of, locked in every single day, that's just not how it works. You've got to come in every day with a plan, be prepared to get punched in the face, and then have your plan B, right? And to me, it's more around that, but remain rooted in the training philosophy that you have. You're not veering off and chasing ideas and you know following what's going on Instagram. Here's what I believe in. Here's what I think is going to work. It's not set in stone. It's adaptable, and every day something new is going to come your way. And how are you going to roll with that and still sort of stay on track with what you're trying to achieve? Another thing is it's easy because the pace of this sport is so fast, right? Play, practice, play, travel, play, travel. You have to kind of zoom out from the day to day, right? I think it's easy to get sort of myopic and hyper focused on today. And if today doesn't go well, it's not a failure. And I think what I learned was just zoom out a little bit. Let's look at 3-day blocks. Let's look at 5-day blocks or 7-day blocks. Okay. And so these are the things I need to accomplish across those time frames, whether it's a 5 day block or a 7 day block. And just because I didn't get something done today doesn't mean I can't get it done the next time around, and just sort of smooth it out a little bit, right? I need to get these things done to maintain these qualities or to sort of get these things accomplished, and not be hyper focused on the day, but give yourself a little breathing room to make sure you're touching on things at the right intervals.
Yeah, I like that. And I forgot who I stole this from, but basically, specifics are just ways to apply principles, right? Because the specifics of the day to day, how much time, how much equipment, how many guys, like those specifics will be what they are. But as long as you have that philosophy in that 5 day block, 7 day block, as long as you're hitting those big boxes, the specifics will be sorted out by the powers that be, of the schedule and the
Yeah.
front office and kind of things like that.
Yeah, and I think reminding yourself that this is not a strength and conditioning team. This is a hockey team, right? They're the main thing is being ready to play a hockey game, not work out every day. And my job is to make sure they're ready for a game. And so there's a lot of ways to accomplish that. And again, my plan is not the plan. It's a piece of the plan. And you know, I have to be adaptable. And so, yeah, digging your heels in and saying, no, we absolutely have to get this done today is probably setting yourself up for failure.
That's a good way to put it for sure. All right, last two. So speaking of all the travel, play, practice, travel, all iterations of that, what is the key to having, if you're in a foreign town in a hotel, no practice, no, just straight up off, you're just in a different city. What is the key to having a successful off day when traveling? And what is your favorite city to have an off day in?
Yeah, cool question. Little easier one to answer. Just so for context, we get 4 mandated days off a month. So in our collective bargaining agreement, the players must have 4 days off per month. That can't be a travel day, can't be anything else, right? So, we usually sneak in an extra day or two per month. Coaches are pretty good at finding ways to get a little extra rest. But on a day off on the road, you're normally coming in late from somewhere. So you've played the night before, you got on a plane, you checked into your hotel at 2 or 3 in the morning, and now you have a day off. So having a little one at home, sleep is really important. So key to my day off, first off, sleep in, as long as I can, if my body allows, but just no alarms, just wake up when your body wakes up. That's sort of first and foremost. I love to then find a good coffee somewhere, make sure that the espressos are rolling and you're taking time to enjoy that, and not just shoot it back on your morning rush to get kids dropped off at school and that sort of thing. Um, Really enjoy then taking the time to have a good workout. I think exercise is really key, keeps you sort of feeling fresh, clears the mind, gives yourself a chance to sort of ponder things. So having a good workout, depending on where we're at in the day, might sneak a nap in. Love a good old
All
nap.
the sleep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think another piece is depending on the city, are there people there that you can fit into your schedule and connect with, whether it's a new connection or an old friend or someone. Like there's certain cities where that sets up well. Occasionally you come across maybe an NBA team in the building. Hey, that's cool. Who's the strength coach? Can we chat? Or there's a training facility nearby. I'd love to go see it. There's occasionally opportunities to interact with people while you're traveling, depending on the city. And then I love to finish off with just a really good meal. Find a nice restaurant, go out, have a really nice meal, and just kind of enjoy that leisurely evening where you're just eating at a normal hour. Like a lot of times we eat dinner at like midnight on an airplane. Like I'm gonna eat dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock. I'm gonna just sort of graze and just no rush to go anywhere. And then I'm always back in my hotel, and I like to just get into bed at like 8 or 9 o'clock and you know throw on some Netflix or something and crash. So to me, they're pretty leisurely. You know, Early on in my career, there was probably more beer drinking involved, but those days are sort of behind me, and just really, really focused on checking a few big boxes and making sure I'm rested and ready to go for the next day. To your question around best cities, we're lucky. We've got some awesome cities in the NHL. And I'll disappoint by saying I don't have a favorite city. There's some awesome places, um, particularly like in Canada. A day off in Vancouver is like always awesome. I'm from Toronto, but it's a great city to be off in and just to be able to walk around there. Montreal is another incredible place to spend time on a day off. Um, and then the other ones I really like, if you're lucky, New York City, it's New York, right? Like you can kind of get lost in the city and just sort of explore and find things and just sort of immerse yourself in the chaos of New York City, which is cool because you're basically out of it a day later. But a couple other places I really like. Chicago's a cool one. Again, there's just maybe it's just the big city type of thing, and there's great restaurants. Dallas is super cool. I love barbecue, so I'm usually seeking out some gluttonous meal where I'm going to pay for it later with the meat sweats. And then it's hard to beat like a place like Fort Lauderdale again. Like day off, you're at the beach. It's probably 80 degrees and sunny, and you're gonna have some fun rolling around that area and have some good food and just it's easy to chill out when the palm trees are swaying and the oceans are 100 yards away.
Fantastic. So we'll end on that. Now I have to go grab some food right after this. But thank you very much for your time, for making the time in person when you were in Chicago. I believe that was an off day for you. But to let you go, plug whatever you have to plug. We talked about Vector, but where can people get more of you? Any websites, which will also be in the show notes. But feel free to. The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I appreciate it. On Twitter or X and Instagram, my handle is Matt Price underscore HP. So that's one place where you can find me. Obviously, we've just launched vectorhockey.com. Still sort of in the growth phase here, but I think check that out. Check back. Often we're going to start publishing some really cool content there. And the thing I'm most proud about is our Stride Effects product. And you can find links from our site to go there. But if you're interested in the biomechanics of skating, I think this is a really exciting tool. There's been a really amazing response so far. We've just launched in the last week, but another super cool product that I think is going to be a real game changer for its sport.
Fantastic. Check all that out. That'll be in the show notes. And thank you very much again for your time. I look forward to chopping it up next.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Matt.